We wanted to ask you about this, because you've written and talked about how if you don't have a poetic spirit, or at least a poetic side, it's very dangerous for you to lead a Marxist movement or be the leader of a socialist state. This question of the poetic side, and you've written about, including to people of our, who've not had a formal education, the importance of Shakespeare and how you can understand that. You've spoken some already tonight about the influence of black music on you, but poetry, literature, these are things that have had a big influence on you. So we wanted to ask you two things. One, how did this shape you, who you are? And then more, why does it matter to have a poetic spirit to lead a revolution?
Well, you see, you held up that memoir cover, and you see that tells you what at the time I thought looked cool.
Yeah.
So you can draw your own conclusions about that. What does it reflect about the times and perhaps about me at the time too? But
well, you missed a whole discussion here last night about the Beach Boys, and then what happened in the move to black culture and all the developments. But
well, I'm sorry I missed it. Sounds good. Sounds interesting. But to get to your question, look, I think human beings need, this is a point that's been made, but it's important to keep coming back to this. Human beings need to be amazed. That's part of what it means to be human. You get amazed when you see an amazing painting or a cultural performance or something someone does in athletics, and you get a certain joy from being amazed at something, especially in a positive way. And this is one element of it. But more generally, human beings have a need for beauty. And beauty comes in many different forms. It comes in nature. And yes, different people do find different things beautiful, but still there's a need for beauty. It comes in nature, it comes in music, it comes in poetry, it comes in literature generally. It comes in many different forms. A sunset and so on and so forth. If the kind of world we're aiming for is not one where that kind of beauty is discounted or, suppressed, but one where the human being's need for that is given much fuller expression. And a lot of that is suppressed in people. Life is so hard for so many people, and things are so bitter that they don't, and they're scuffling so hard they don't even have the chance to enjoy much beauty, though they do find ways even so. So, the kind of world we're aiming for is a world where the human ability to, appreciate beauty in many different forms would be given much fuller expression. And that links up with the question. There's also beauty in the intellectual realm. Look at this, telescope and what it's showing us about the universe. There's beauty in that. There's wonder in that. Isn't that important for human beings to have a full life? And the same when you're trying to solve a problem, not just a political problem, but trying to understand a phenomenon in nature, and then you finally do understand it. It's a very exhilarating experience. The same is true in literature, like you mentioned Shakespeare. Well, a lot of Shakespeare language is archaic. It means it's outdated. It means language that people all would have understood generally at the time, but not all of it, not even most of it. But some of it is language that we no longer use. Most people don't go around saying forsooth and so on and so forth, and there are other expressions that are even, more abstract to people, or, unfamiliar to people now. But there's a lot of beauty in the language of Shakespeare. And let's be clear. There are a lot of dead people who are not white who have also created a lot of beauty in the world, and too much of that has been suppressed. But there are also dead white men who have created a lot of beauty, and we should not be prevented from enjoying that as well. And Shakespeare is one of them. The language is beautiful. As I said in my memoir, I enjoy puns. There are all kinds of puns in Shakespeare. Some of them are better than others. But there are all kinds of humor. There's even malapropisms, which means misusing or a word, saying a word wrong, or Like, I remember one, I think it's in Macbeth, the play Macbeth, which, by the way, was a favorite of Huey Newton. He used to quote, Act 5, Scene 5, Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace from day to day, etc. But earlier in there's a scene where there's this drunken gatekeeper at one of the castles, and he opens the gate and he starts rambling on, and at one point he says, makes a comparison, he says, but comparisons are odorous. Now, it's actually supposed to be comparisons are odious. Odious means hateful. But he's drunk and he does a malapropism. He says, but after all, comparisons are odorous. Means they stink, So, even things like that are, I get a kick out of it. It's funny. It's a good use of a malapropism. It's a good use of language, and distorting language for the purpose of humor. And different people like different poets, modern poetry from the Romantic period. I happen to like Keats as I was growing up. I found the language very evocative. It made me think about a lot of things, and it also just, it created a certain feeling. Beyond just, what it made me think about, created a certain feeling. Bright star, were I as steadfast as thou art. Just you're looking at a star and saying, okay, this star is, seems to have a lot of constancy. It's there all the time. Would that I could be as firm as that. Things like that, make you think, make you feel. If you don't have an appreciation for that, then when you turn to politics, you're going to tend to be very dogmatic. And you're going to be very dry. And nobody's going to live in any kind of world that you have anything to do with setting the terms of. At least I certainly wouldn't. And I don't think most people would. So this is what I mean when I say, you don't have to write poetry. That's not my point. But, you have to have an appreciation for beauty in all these different kinds of ways. Or else you're not aiming for the kind of society that we need to be aiming for, where human beings can really thrive in the fullest way and in the fullest dimension.